This video is sponsored by Skillshare. This little teak chest of drawers I found at Habitat for Humanity Restore. Now I catch a lot of flack for doing pieces like this. People don't understand why I would buy something that is veneer and overpressed wood. And the fact of the matter is, most mid-century furniture is, especially this Danish teak stuff. And it is absolutely worth it. This stuff still sells really well for a good price. While most of this is veneer, there is some solid teak trim. It had a fair bit of damage to the top, and one of the handles was completely broken, but aside from that it was in decent shape. All the drawers slid well, it was sturdy, and I thought this would be a pretty good challenge to see if I could fix this drawer handle. I bought a small piece of solid teak that would be perfect for this. I've never done anything like this handle before. This is definitely going to be practice for me, so don't judge me too harshly. Let us begin! My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. If it wasn't for this handle, this piece would actually probably go fairly quickly with the refinishing. But I know this is going to take me quite a bit of time, one, to get it out of this recessed area that it's glued into, and of course to try to remanufacture this. This would have been cut with probably some sort of special router or machinery. And you can see there's a bit to it. There's a couple of different levels here. There are multiple angles. And it has to be precise to fit into this little hole. So this is going to be quite challenging. It is also glued in there extremely well. And I have to be careful when prying it out because I need to be able to glue this somewhat back together so that I can get a good look at what I need to recreate. If I pull this out in chunks and don't put it together, I'm kind of working blindly. This is the recess everything needs to fit into, so I need to get rid of that glue in there before I put the new piece in. But first, I'm going to try to piece together what I'm able to. I just used a little bit of crazy glue and tried to put this back together well enough that I could make a template from it. Now this little piece of teak I bought is actually perfect. It's only slightly taller than the handle is and just a bit wider. So first thing I'm going to do is cut down this board to be a bit closer to what I need. Now let me just say here, this is absolutely not a how-to video. This is basically me experimenting and taking you along for the ride. In other words, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need to get a pretty accurate depiction of the size I need to make the bottom of this handle. So I just used a little bit of painter's tape and a carpenter's pencil and marked out the shape. My plan at this point is to get this as close to the size I need as possible. And even though I have a full-size router and a trim router, I don't really have a bit that I think is going to work to create that hole where your fingers go in to pull the drawer handle out. So I'm going to give myself some practice with some carving tools and chisels. Oh gosh, you guys, I can hear the comments now. I am absolutely not a woodworker, but it is something that I need to get better at, and I actually have a piece coming up fairly soon where I'm going to have to add some wood to the legs of this piece and carve them. So this little dresser here with its broken handle is going to be good practice for me. I'm just using these digital calipers to let me know exactly how much I need to take off and where for each level of this handle. Again, a router or even a CNC would make this so much faster. I'm trying to learn how to use some of these hand tools, so just bear with me. Also, it is not cold in my garage. These gloves are what they call anti-cut gloves. So if I happen to have a slip with the chisel, it will protect my hands better than if I had nothing at all, of course. Now the front part of the handle has these really cool sloped edges, so I just used the belt sander here to try to mimic what is there, and I got pretty close, I think. So I have most of the profile done. Now I just need to try to dig out that recessed bit. Now a while back someone had sent me these really cool carving tools, and I hadn't yet had a chance to use them, so I thought this would be the perfect time. I'm going to be using this scoop one, and yes, this is painfully slow, but there's a couple things I'm accomplishing. One, I'm trying to recreate this handle, but even more importantly, I'm trying to get used to these tools. There's definitely a learning curve to these, so I'm excited to keep at it and get better with time. Once I was happy enough with the handle, it was time to place it into the recessed cavity in the drawer. I'm actually using some epoxy for this. Because I'm going to be gluing wood to that pressed wood substrate, I want to make sure that there's a strong bond, and I wasn't sure if wood glue was going to be quite enough. I also need to make sure that this stays firmly in place. I put the majority of the epoxy on the bottom of the handle itself, but had a little bit left over, so I just smeared that around inside the little recessed cavity. I pushed my new handle in and then clamped it down and let it dry. While that was drying, it was time to finally tackle this finish. Now I took my scraper to see what kind of finish was on this, and almost nothing came off, so my best guess is that this is some sort of a Danish oil finish. It's definitely not lacquer, it's definitely not conversion varnish. These ones are super easy to refinish because there's nothing to really strip or scrape. Basically, you just sand it off. Now you can sand by hand, which is probably quite safe on this veneer because it is thin. I'm just using a fairly fine grit sand pad on my SurfPrep, but I've also been using a power sander for quite some time, so I'm confident in being able to do this without blowing through the veneer. I started with a 150 grit and then I went back in with a 180 grit. Now there are some very fine scratches left in this. They're not deep enough to steam out. In fact, my fingernail won't even catch on them. They're basically surface scratches, but there's a good chance that those might show through once I put the finish on. I don't want to risk sanding further into the veneer, so those fine scratches are just something I'm going to have to live with. There's also some gouging here on the front trim, which is solid teak. As I'm sanding that, I'm going to have to try to smooth that out as best I can. I'm using Odie's Universal Oil on this. It's a tung oil based finish. I've used it on several teak pieces in our house and I absolutely love it. It really brings out the warmth and character of the teak and provides a good level of protection without being one of those plastic feeling film finishes like lacquer or shellac. It's a very natural looking finish. There is still a faint bit of those very fine scratches showing through, and I'm just gonna have to accept that it is what it is. This one piece of trim wasn't sitting properly. You can see there's a massive nail in it, so this must have come loose from its glue and someone tried to fix it by putting a nail in it. Stop driving nails in things! The glue is not flat, it's a little bit lopsided, so I'm just using this to try to smooth it out, and then I'm going to reattach it with some glue and clamps. If you remember in the beginning too, I showed that this wasn't straight. So as I'm clamping it, I'm going to straighten it one clamp at a time, starting from the top all the way down, and then just let it dry. So to answer the question now posed in the thumbnail of this video, why bother with these pieces? You can see that it is made of veneer and pressed wood. There are actually several reasons. The first one, probably the most important to me, is that there's nothing wrong with these pieces. They're still sturdy, they're still fully functional, and we have to stop with this throwaway mentality. I'm willing to bet that a lot of the people that shun this stuff have no idea that probably half of the furniture in their home is actually veneer. If I had $1 for every time I went to pick up a Facebook Marketplace piece that someone had listed as solid wood, only to find out that it's actually veneer, well, I wouldn't need to work. A while back I did a video on my channel about solid wood versus veneer versus laminate. I do plan on redoing this video at some point because there is some extra information I want to add, but this is a great starting point if you're not really sure what the difference is. Also, these pieces that people suggest I put in the burn pile are actually worth a fair bit of money. They're highly sought after by mid-century enthusiasts, especially the ones that have maker's marks on them. A lot of people seem to think veneer is the same thing as laminate or melamine. Totally different product. Veneer is actual wood. It's just very thinly sliced instead of a thick piece. The 80s and 90s is where things started to go wrong. It started to get a lot cheaper and you'd have veneer on top, pressed wood as a substrate, and nothing on the bottom, so there was nothing to keep that from bowing. So a lot of times when people think of veneer and pressed wood, they picture those cheap shelves you get from Walmart or Canadian Tire that bow if you put 2 books on them. Now, speaking of veneer, for some reason this panel in the front is a faux veneer. It's a laminate panel. The rest of the piece is solid teak and teak veneer, including the side panel, but for some reason the front isn't. I'm going to fill these little holes here, and I'm actually going to be painting part of the base in black. Time again for some learning. A lot of you guys know I'm a bit of a night owl and sometimes have trouble sleeping, so one of my favorite things to do is actually watch videos. I really love that Skillshare has so many videos related to what I do, whether that's filming or editing. Today I'm watching a video called Cinematography Basics, which is an introduction to lighting techniques by Zach Mulligan. Well, okay, technically it's me and the bunnies watching. Skillshare is a fantastic place to learn about pretty much anything you've always wanted to know, whether that's helping you with business or a hobby. There is a class for everyone. The first 1,000 people to click the link in the description box below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. What have you always wanted to learn? Once my patch had dried, I went in with some vinyl sealer. If I were to paint directly over this, the paint would absorb right into the patch and it would be quite noticeable. I did 3 coats of coal black by Fusion mineral paint. And as much as I didn't want to paint the sides there, I kind of had to because of this front panel that wasn't even teak. I'm opting to put some Odie's wood butter over top of this as well. The wood butter is a little bit different than the normal Odie's oil. It has a higher wax content. It gives just sort of a nice low luster sheen, adds a little bit of extra protection, and it makes this just absolutely silky smooth. I wish you could reach through your phone or TV and feel it because it is like butter. The wood butter is one of my favorite Odie's products. Well, I know this video has been a little bit shorter than some of my more recent ones, but I hope you enjoyed this fairly quick flip, and I hope I pleaded my case for mid-century furniture with its veneer and often pressed wood substrates. They have lasted right alongside of the solid wood pieces, and like I said in my last video, in some cases are even in better shape than the solid wood pieces, which are more prone to cracking and expanding and contracting with the seasons. While I definitely don't consider my little hand tool remake a complete success, it's not an utter failure either. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.